are live. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Tuesday Night Fiction's discussion series. I'm your host, Nicholas Austin, and we're going to be recapping the first episode of the Tuesday Night Fiction series altogether, the first chapter of the Civilands series, Part 1, The River White. That episode released last Tuesday, and I'm very excited to be on this first discussion episode. It's going to be right up close and personal with me, the author of the series, which you can find on Amazon. And you can find all the first three books of the series that are there. Every week we're going to be releasing a new chapter from those books. Book 4 coming in June, book 5 coming sometime in the future. We will see. But yeah, so we're in these discussion episodes, we're going to be discussing what went into that chapter, both the podcast version and the writing version. Going to be discussing kind of my thoughts around general ideas that were present in the chapter, maybe some Easter eggs that were there, thoughts on the characters, and a whole lot of just basic ranting that I'm going to be doing each week after the week of the chapter that is released that week. Next week will be Chapter 2, Our Feast, Their Famine. That's what that one was called, and I'm really excited to be getting that one out. But for now, let's talk about Part 1. Before I go into that, though, just want to talk a little bit about what's coming. So as I mentioned last week in the first chapter, there is a giveaway. I'm giving away the first 3 books of the Civilands series, as well as a copy of Ready Player One. That giveaway is going to be going on over the course of this month as I kind of ramp up on the series. If you share an episode of this podcast, any episode at any time, tell people what your thoughts are if you like the episode, and copy me in it. I'm on at NB Austin Books, basically on most social media. I will be monitoring those, and I will be picking a random winner and sending them signed copies of those books. So share, subscribe, like as much as possible. But other than that, let's just get right into it. So for today's episode, I'm going to be doing a lot more idea discussion rather than talking about content. I think because this is the first episode, I want to go into kind of how my journey got me into writing, because you might be surprised at how little I was into that prior to the actual act of beginning. But I want to talk a lot about that. I want to hopefully try and relate it to you as much as possible. I know that my experience has been kind of a mirror of a lot of my friends' experiences, and even in different areas, like even if it's not just in writing, even if it's not in podcasting or not even remotely close. I'll go into some examples, one being like a brewery and one being like a guy who just loves insurance. So I'm going to go into some of that and what it kind of takes to reach that point. I'll do a little bit of content at the end. Obviously, this is a very fantasy is a very interesting genre, so how I got into that I'll go into a little bit later, but mostly I'm going to be talking about the journey. So today the theme is growth. And I want to say welcome to the gang, welcome to the Civil Gang. We're going to be talking about growth and how my journey can help you with your journey. So the purpose of the Civilands series, growth. So when it comes to that idea, I've been kind of going through, as we all do at all times, a very long process of figuring out kind of who I am. And I think what you'll see over the course of all 5 books is that is a common thread for every character. That's the thing I'm most interested in realizing for every character is each one finding out who they are. So in order for me to kind of make this relatable, I'll go into a little bit about who I am. So I am, as I said, my name is Nicholas Austin. Grew up, born and raised in New York. Moved out to Texas to go to the University of Texas, Hook 'em Horns, and spent some time in Houston as well as Austin. Somewhere along the way, and I usually relate it to post college, I really hit a wall. I kind of finished. I was always a pretty good student. I kept going and going and going, and it's funny because it's actually in my dedication, this metaphor that I basically used for college in general for someone who is, I guess, maybe on the more studious side. The way I like to describe it and the way I always kind of thought about it was college and growing up in general is kind of like this like mountain, right? And you always see the top. The top is always very clear, and you're always climbing towards that peak. And you can see the peak, and you know where the obstacles are. You know how to get to the next checkpoint, whether that be passing a certain class or getting certain grades or getting into a certain university. And so along that way, it was always kind of laid out for you, right? Like your counselor tells you what courses to take, your parents tell you what direction to go, how to think, and how to look at other people and talk to other people. Um, so you keep climbing and you climb and you climb and you climb all the way until graduation, right? Like graduating college is that peak at the top. And one day you do, and you finally get there. And that day, those 24 hours, right, are very exciting. It's your day. You get all the pictures, you get all the accolades. They shoot off fireworks. If you're at the University of Texas, it's pretty large. Everything is definitely bigger here. And you get to that point, and the next day, the next day that it's over, right? There's no more mountaintop, especially if you already have a job out of college. Obviously, it depends whether that's the case or not. But if you don't, if you do have that set up, and if you mostly have everything figured out by the time you finish college, you kind of reach this plateau, right? So when you get to the top of the mountain, there's no more up that's already set that you don't have to create yourself. And if you don't realize that you have to create it yourself, you could either fall straight down or you can go kind of straight. And straight to me is even scarier than falling, honestly. I mean, I knowing that you are always working towards something is something that I need to live with. I need that at almost all times. So when I am going straight, I feel I might as well be going down. So I hit that kind of just lull for a while. I mean, I went about a year and a half of just not knowing why I was feeling the way I was feeling. Like I was down and I didn't understand what to do, and I didn't at times, I didn't even know, I guess, that I was down, which is crazy to even think about now. It's weird to put it into words, but you kind of just you don't even know how to address the problem until you just kind of smash into the ground, right? And so I think where I got to at that point, this is before I was into writing at all. I didn't have writing the year and a half after college. I honestly wasn't even that much into reading. I'll get a little bit more into that. But what I did know is the things that I kind of liked. I honestly wasn't even really doing much of those things at the time. I was just kind of working and everything just, I guess, felt kind of gray, So as that kind of built up, and as my stress, I guess, because of that kind of built up, I just reached a boiling point where I kind of realized I can't keep going straight anymore. And the more you just keep going straight, you gotta, when you're a climber, you have to climb, right? When you're a mountain climber, nobody can tell you not to do it. And so what I realized at that point is I didn't know what it meant, right? I didn't know how or what to do it with, but I needed to build my own mountain. And because nobody's going to do it for you once you get to that point. So I got to thinking about it. How do I build a mountain? And thinking and thinking and thinking, like, I'm Greek, and like I was basically like that little statue guy. I don't know if that's Greek. Maybe it is. It might be Italian. I don't know. One or the other. But I was basically thinking again, how do I build what do I want to climb towards, right? So I think, and that can come from a couple different. What I learned is that can come from a couple different places, right? At the time, through my kind of contemplation, as I so eloquently put it a second ago, I thought of a couple different. I was centering my life around a couple different things. I'll go into two first specifically. What did I like and what did I hate? Okay, and I think those two things were very important to me. So when I was in high school, a big part of my life was music, and I always played in bands. I always had friends who played music, and playing music was the thing that when I was younger was always like, if I'm at a show, if I'm at a music festival, that's where I picture myself up there. That would be like the dream scenario, right? So, but at some point, I think probably in high school at some point I decided for some reason that that was unrealistic, one way or another, and maybe to some extent there were things that I wasn't crazy about when it came to that in terms of the actual work that goes into it. A little bit of both. So, but what I realized was that that kind of gave me context of like what a mountain that I wanted to climb meant, right? So, and then that was the first thing, right? Music was the first thing that I liked a lot. And music was also something that I found hatred in. I mean, if I heard too much of a certain type of song that sounded repetitive, I was like, I, I want to make music to make it better than that, right? I think that, and when I say hate, that's kind of more of what I mean. So you find something you like, and you find the need to kind of change it, or make something new out of it, or make it your own. Whether whether that means reinventing the wheel, it doesn't necessarily have to mean reinventing the wheel, but just making it your own, you know? And that's kind of what I was looking for in general. And the more the more time I spent thinking about it, the more I realized at the time how much I started watching TV shows. And I think it started with Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was one example of what I like. Game of Thrones was one example of what I like. The example of what I hate, that honestly, I like to give it as much credit for getting me into writing as the things that I liked. But um, The Walking Dead was one show that I was like really into for a while, and then I certain things happened. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but certain things happened where I was like, Jesus, why did they do that? Why did they write it that way? They ruined a good show, you know? I mean, and that kept happening over and over. And the more that that happened, the more I started to realize, like, I started to feel guilty, I guess, about the fact that I was judging something so seriously. And I mean, when I say judging, like, I'll give you the example of Breaking Bad. So Breaking Bad was the first show that I really figured out what Netflix was. And I was so into it on Netflix that I remember I gave my aunt and uncle's account login and password that I was using to watch Breaking Bad to almost everyone I knew, because I was just telling myself everyone needs to watch this show so I could talk to them about it. And so I gave it out so many times in the end that the next thing I know, when I tried to log in, I got locked out because the password had changed at that point. So, for example, that's the example of something I like, but the same passion came up with the thing that I hate. I think that's the same topic of what I was just saying. But yeah, basically, like you get so into something, or you get so out of something that you just start to really push it off on people. Yeah. So basically, with The Walking Dead, right? Instead of giving out my password to people, I was bitching about the show to people. Essentially, I mean, telling everyone that, even people that liked it, like, what I hated about it, and I couldn't stop, you know, with that hatred, and I wanted to channel it, I guess, a little bit more. I felt guilty about it, right? So I think the passion that I found in TV shows, I decided that's my mountain, right? That's something that I know I can do, even if it's not just on my own in my free time, is try at least to tell stories. And I never read books. I never wrote a script for a TV show, but I knew that the stories behind them were the things that were getting me excited on a daily basis. I mean, like, because I was watching a lot of TV at the time. And so that kind of was the first step into storytelling, right? Was just deciding, why don't I try this? Because the complaining needs to stop. Nobody wants to hear it anymore, and it's better if I be proactive. So that was kind of the first day. And from there, like I said, I had never really read books, but I'd seen what a book looked like on paper. I'd never seen a TV show script. So I decided to start writing books. Interestingly enough, even though reading was never my thing. And don't ask me why I picked that instead of just going right to the script. I figured I'd go to the script eventually. In fact, I kind of knew I would at some point, but I started with the books anyway. So before I even got into that, though, let's backpedal just a little bit. So again, I kind of decided that this was something that interests me and that I wanted to try to start doing. So one day, one dreary, rainy day, I remember clearly, I was sitting down and I was so bored, but I had my computer on my lap, and I took my computer out and I was like, today's the day, today's the day I'm going to start doing this. This is going to be the beginning of something magical, maybe. I don't know. Something that is going to continue and to be a hobby and I'm going to keep going with. So I started, opened up a Word document, blank Word document. I didn't know how to begin. I had no idea. So what I decided I was going to do in that moment was just write down a couple of genre ideas, of things that I might be interested in, like genres I might be interested in. And I did come up with maybe, I probably came up with like 10 or 20, maybe less, somewhere around there, different just genres or story ideas that I thought might be interesting. And I wrote them all down. I looked over the list a couple times, and it was really fascinating because every single one on there was so dumb in my mind. I couldn't even think for a second why those things came to my head or why I put them on paper. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm done. This is over. I'm moving on. Like this, I'll find another interest. Maybe I'll go back to music. I don't know, but this is not going to work. So a week goes by of me not even thinking about it, honestly. And when I came back to it, was like literally the next Monday, and it wasn't even a conscious thing, really, which is the weirdest part. I didn't decide this time that I was going to sit down and write, but I was in a similar setting, right? I had my computer on my lap, and all of a sudden, an idea came into my head out of nowhere. I mean, out of nowhere. And what I kind of realized is it was similar to the way you write. For me, it was similar to how writing music would go, where like a beat comes into my head or a melody or whatever. And all I saw was a girl being chased through the woods. And that was it. I had no context. I had no genre. I had no story. I had no world. I had no nothing. I just saw a girl being chased through the woods. And that was the first thing that I was like, that would be pretty cool to start something. It would be pretty intense to start something off. I'm just going to start writing this down, and voila, like 3 pages later, I have the beginning of a story. I didn't know it. Like I said, I had no idea at the time what my genre was going to be. I had no idea at the time that there was going to be fantasy elements involved. I didn't know why she was running from people. I didn't know why they were chasing her. I didn't know why in the woods. I just think maybe it was a cool setting. But the amazing thing is that when you go to that default mode, when you know what you're into, and when the idea strikes and you just accept it, I think that is something you have to take advantage of. You have to wait for that moment, and maybe build up to that moment, right? I don't think necessarily that over time I was even waiting. I think that moment came because of what came before it. And the interesting thing there is that was about when I mentioned my plateau before, right? So graduating college, year and a half goes by, sink to the bottom of the earth. And at the bottom of the earth, to the time that I started writing that first couple pages, was probably another, I would say, at least 6 months to a year later. And I think that whole thing, I mean, when I first crashed, I mean, one of the first things I started doing was working out a lot for some reason. I just needed to do it. I needed to struggle through something. I'm not really sure why. But I think even that was part of coming to eventually finding that thing, right? That thing that was going to get me excited and that thing that was going to keep me going. And so again, so to try to make that relatable, if it's not already, think about what you like, think about what you hate, and think about why you feel that way about those things. What kind of drives you crazy when you see someone do it the wrong way? And whether you think you can be into it or not is so irrelevant, you know? I mean, like I said, I'd felt guilty for like a couple days about the fact that I don't read a lot. I mean, but you kind of learn as you go what it means to be a writer, right? I mean, you don't need to know the inside and outside of Dante's Inferno to eventually write it one day. I mean, you what you have to do is you have to keep doing it every single day. You have to get better and better and better until you get to the point where you can feel like you're on that level, right? But I don't really buy into the people who say um, you just have to consume and consume and consume to get to the point of being a master. Like what you have to do is you have to do to be a master, and you have to understand what makes things good and what doesn't. So one of the things that I'm going to go into also later on, not in this episode, but probably in later episodes, is that what I found, I mean, looking back and reading book one even, I mean, the amount of growth as a writer that I've seen in my own work from book one to book four is like, it it's like when I came out with book one and I released it, I felt proud and I still feel extremely proud, but there is just a level of depth that just isn't there, right? That is now in book four because you learn little things. I mean, little elements and little things that go together, and there's a piece of you that ends up wanting to go back and maybe redoing, but at the same time, you got to move forward. You got to always be moving forward. You got to always be doing more and coming out with more and being and growing outward, right? And that's a concept that I'll probably go into again also later in future episodes. But yeah, so at that point, I had started writing book one and I just kind of kept doing it. I mean, like every single day, then at that point for I guess another 3 or 4 or 5 months, I was always writing, always adding, always thinking about things. I remember one of my favorite feelings in the world that I kind of went into like just a second ago, actually, is the feeling of when you're struggling with something and you can't come up with that character's backstory, right? There's one character in particular who I think you'll meet in the next episode. Yeah, you'll meet him in the next episode, Dominic Turner, who had a backstory, who needed a backstory, who I just couldn't figure it out, right? I couldn't figure out what made sense. I struggled and struggled and struggled, and that to me was kind of my first run-in with writer's block, I guess. And what I learned is that the best thing that I could do was put him away, honestly. Put Dominic Turner in my back pocket and just have in my head what I needed, but not force it at the same time. And one day, like probably a couple days after this problem first arose, I was driving in my car on the way to work, and all of a sudden, like, boom, his whole past just popped into my mind, and it made so much sense, and it was like it was always there, but it was almost like it was my own backstory or whatever, just like as if it was a memory or something, pops into my head, and I mean specifically, I screamed in the car. Like I want to be clear here. I want to be honest with you. This is our gang, right? I will be the leader of this gang, and I want you to call in and tell me that you've joined. Join up. Let's go west. Let's take over this bitch. But at that moment, I screamed my head off. And like I said, we're going to be honest here. I screamed my head off in just pure joy and excitement, and that feeling, right? That was the mountain again. That's what I realized at that time. That was reaching the next cliff on the mountain and getting there and finishing your third year of college, right? All for that moment. And then from there, those moments just kept building, with every book, with every nuance of editing, of talking to people who have read the book and everything. Those moments come to you naturally when you build your own mountain, when you understand where you're going. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about that. So where are we going? Okay, in the series, as a writer, once you find the purpose, where are you going and how do you get there? So I recently had a conversation the other day with my brother who was talking to me a bit, by the way, his name is Brian. Hi, Brian. A little bit about music. So, Brian recently has gotten into playing music, um, at least recently more seriously playing music. And he sent me an example of a song that he wrote with a friend. And he let me he let me play it, let me listen to it, and what I took from it was what I took from it, right? I mean, I've been playing music for a long time. I actually made, I don't know if, I guess I haven't mentioned this yet, but I'm the one who also makes the music for the series. Those are all my original songs in the first episode. And so I listened through it and I told him that it sounded good. The quality was good. The song sounded interesting. And I pretty much left it at that. So what Brian kind of followed up with me with is the same thing that I realized at that point, that I feel sometimes when people don't get entirely deep with their reviews or something. If someone doesn't write me back an essay of what they thought of something that I wrote musically or the books wise, I start to feel this too. And what he ended up following up with me with was, I understand you're saying you like it, but are you only saying that because I'm your brother? And if if it wasn't the case, would you think it was good? Specifically, use that word, good. And what it made me think about was one that I'd felt the same feeling a lot. I mean, a lot. Okay, because when you first start, I mean, the people who are reading and who are following your journey and your art are mostly your friends and family, right? Because that's until you get some natural traction, that's kind of where you start out, obviously. So, you want to know what the level of honesty is. You want to know what the level of true natural pleasure the person gets out of your work. So what I thought about and where that kind of took me was to a place where I said, I thought about my own music specifically. It's funny because I've been writing for longer, actually, at this point, I think, than I was actually making music. Maybe that's not true. That's not true. Close to, it's been a while. This has been the most consistent thing I've done, I think, like an everyday thing. But so I thought about music that I made though, because when I'd been younger, I had recorded some songs and with my band, and some of them had varying quality, right? So we had a couple that we paid for someone else to produce, and then we had a couple that we produced on our own just because we wanted to hear what we came up with. So upon doing that, right, upon listening to those songs, there was a 100% difference recording quality wise of the songs that we produced versus the ones that got professionally produced. When having your own music in your music library is, one, a fantastic thing. Two, when I'm listening through, let's say the example I gave him was that if I have my songs on shuffle, and one of them comes up after a song from a band that I just like, who's I guess a professional band, the ones that I got professionally done, I could listen to those right after the professional band and not really think about the fact that I wrote the song. It's just another song coming up in my shuffle. But for the ones that were a little lesser produced, I could tell the difference. It bothered me more hearing my own music. And while I knew that the quality of the song writing wise was good, I had that knowledge that the actual product that I'd come up with could have been better, right? And thinking about it that way, what I kind of realized when I was describing this to him was that in an area that you like, what is good and what is not, right? Or what you think is good and what it's not. And what you think is good and what is not is 100% something that someone else will think is good or not. if you really are a connoisseur of whatever you're doing or have serious opinions about it, then most likely your opinions are shared. I mean, unless you have no social ability at all, then most likely your opinions are going to be shared by someone somewhere at some time. So when you're thinking, when you play back something and you say, "Is it good?" What I told him with his music. So again, his music was something that I don't listen to all the time, so I can't really say I don't really know what I'm comparing it to, right? When you say is something good, you have a bar in your mind that you're comparing yourself to. You know whether you're reaching that or not, right? You know that because if you if you didn't if you were reaching it, you wouldn't even think about it, right? You if let's say that you wrote the next Game of Thrones and you knew that it was Game of Thrones. I mean, like it was just another book. Let's say actually, let's back up. Let's say you didn't even write it, but it had your name on it, right? And it was just as good quality as Game of Thrones. And you look back on it and you kind of try to think of, is it good or not? I mean, you wouldn't even think about that if you hadn't written it, but it had been received the same, and otherwise it appeared to have all the same quality, right? So when it comes to how you perceive the art you're creating or the thing you're creating or whatever it is, you understand what's good and what's not. Okay, so that was kind of long-winded, but you kind of you know if it's good or it isn't, and you also have to be honest there, right? So sometimes it won't be. So one of the things too that came up was with music in particular, and I guess this kind of translates to everything when I really think about it, but with music, maybe you're technically not great at the instrument you're playing. Maybe you have to get better at the instrument you're playing. So when you're listening back and you're saying, is it good? Is it at the level that I want it to be? You have to first think, am I playing at the level that I think I need to be playing at to be perceived by myself as good, right? Because if I can perceive myself as good, somebody else also will by default. Especially, like I said, especially if you're really into the thing. So you get that down, and then you also need the production quality of whatever it is you're doing, right? So I have another friend, like I said at the beginning, super into beer, right? From the beginning, and I pushed and pushed and pushed. I love you, Ben. Pushed and pushed and pushed to get this guy making beer, and eventually he did. But he started out by building up the knowledge of what goes into a beer, right? So the first step was the technical side. You need to know, you need to have the knowledge of why it might come out good or why it might not come out good. Then after that, you make it, and the production quality of whether you make it will determine whether Ben can drink his beer and say, is this good? Is this good comparatively to any brewery I might go to? Or do I need to keep getting better? And I think I'm actually pretty sure. I mean, these are the same conversations that have come up where it's like, yes, have people. I'm not telling you not to have people test market your product or art or whatever. Obviously, have people give you feedback and take that feedback as much as possible. But when it comes to the fear of should I pursue this or not, and that honestly is a way bigger hurdle than even getting feedback, is the fear of like, should I keep going because am I good or not? You know the answer to that, right? You know whether that's a yes or a no, and you shouldn't. Ideally, you don't ever go with no. I mean, it's almost never no. So, write the book. Write the damn book already, and keep writing the book. It's been now. So I mean, I think that first time when I sat down and wrote those first words was, I believe, the summer of 2016. So now it's been like 2.5 years since I could do math. 2.5 years since I started writing, and now I'm on my fourth. I finished writing the fourth, almost through editing the fourth. That one is coming June 2019, like I said. I'm super excited about that book. I am so pumped to release that book. You don't even know. But Anyway, so yeah, I mean, keep doing what you're doing and don't stop doing what you're doing. And if you have any feedback about what I'm saying, if you have any questions about what I've gone through, um, or just want to know more about my story in general, like I said, reach out to me on social media, reach out to me on my website. I think yeah, I have a fan mail, so you can send me mail or whatever. And let's talk about it. Let's grow this gang. Let's talk about growth. Let's talk about this journey, and we'll go more into that of the characters. I'll talk way more about the characters as the chapters go on. Right now we're still a little we're still a little mysterious here. I'm gonna keep this a little mysterious still in terms of the content because a lot has gone down in part one. Um, and I'll get into that a little bit of that right now. Now that we've kind of gone into the background, my background, and hopefully which has given you an understanding of why I'm writing what I'm writing. Okay, because it comes down to figuring out who you are from beginning to end. Every thread of what I've written is going to come down to who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes we don't agree with why we're doing what we're doing. Sometimes we live without truth. And that's one thing that I mean, over the past 3 months, you'll see it more in book 4 and 5, because that's where I'm at writing right now. But living with truth and getting to the point in your life where you can live with truth is the ultimate journey. Honestly, the ultimate good that you can give to the world and take from the world and find in time. Hopefully you find it. Hope maybe you won't. I mean, some people don't, but who's to say? Who's to say? We're gonna get there together, though. This gang, our gang, we're getting there together, and I'll be the one to get you there. I'll help you. Anyway, let's get into the content a little bit. So why this genre? Um, like I said, I didn't know when I first started. I really had no idea. I wasn't the biggest fantasy fan. I mean, I guess I liked Lord of the Rings a lot. Um, I got into Game of Thrones, obviously, one of the bigger, like, I didn't read it, but I got into the TV show. So maybe that had some influence. But I think the biggest part of my genre that makes sense to me, absolute perfect sense, is that this is an American story and not literally based in America. This is a fictional fantasy world, but I wanted to see the romanticism of the American ideal of manifest destiny. And I know that it gets a bad rap sometimes. Obviously bad things happen, right? And that's another theme is people are gray. Every single person is gray. If you define people by a good or bad narrative, there's about 5% of the world that's either good or bad. 2.5% is all bad. 2.5% is all good, and the other 95% is gray. Some more to the bad, some more to the good, but they are gray. They believe what they're doing is right, and it might even be more than 95%, but you get the idea. There's a distribution there somewhere, and that is what I wanted to explore here, because the idea of manifest destiny is way too interesting for medieval times to be the only example of a land that gets explored for fantasy. I think that's ridiculous. And I understand that I didn't, I guess, invent this genre probably, but it is also super interesting to me. And I think, I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I'm American. That's what I am, and I'm super proud of it. And so I wanted to kind of explore the ideas of what created this society and what goes into creating a new society and exploring West. So one of the other reasons, again, so I consider myself super American. My ancestors were not from America. My ancestors came to America from Greece at some time in the beginning of the 20th century. And one of the recent privileges that I've had, I mean, this is honestly was one of the greatest joys in my life, one of the greatest joys in my life to be able to do, and it came to be because of writing. And this is again what living in truth gets you, but being true to yourself and following and making your own mountain and following it and climbing it to the top, this is where it gets you. So my grandpa gave me a memoir written by my great grandpa, who was the first one to come to America, who also shares my name. His name is Nicholas as well. And I never met him. I didn't know him. I didn't really know of him. But reading his memoir was the story that I'm writing right now. It is the story of a person who went west for something better. And in a way, I did that as well. I mean, going from New York to Texas, I don't even know. It's kind of weird. It's weird in a spiritual kind of way, I guess, but it's like I just kind of equate it to, like I said, living in truth. These things come to you when you live in truth. And what I found was that there were so many parallels in his story and mine that can't be a coincidence. And I don't know where that stems from. We're going to explore where that stems from in the book. There's themes of family, there's themes of growth, and there's themes of religion, and there's themes of society in general. And those things all play a part here. And those things all played a part in my grandpa's memoir and in my great-grandpa's memoir. And making that... So what I did was I took that memoir, which was all kind of written and copied on paper, and published it using Amazon, because that has been honestly one of the most exciting... Amazon gets a bad rap. I'm going to go into that a little bit right now because I just want to I want to rant here. So I recently had a discussion with someone about Amazon. Being from New York, there's obviously a story about Amazon in New York. I'm going to go into it because I get really bothered by this. People complain about Amazon avoiding taxes or whatever. I'm not going to go into the political stuff too much, but when people complain about Amazon, I don't think they have any understanding of all the good that Amazon provides to the world. Okay? And I'm only going to go into this from one point of view, but when it comes to being able to self-publish a book, that is unheard of. If my great-grandpa knew that there was a copy of his book sitting on his great-grandson's shelf right now with his face on it, that he wrote on paper when he was a young man in America with a family, growing his family, he would cry for days. My grandpa, who I was able to give the book to, literally did cry on FaceTime with me. I mean, that is something that, and I'm not saying Amazon is perfect. I don't know everything about the company, but that is a beautiful thing that they provide to the world. And I mean, to paint, when you paint people as the villain, again, this is the purpose of the grayness. Everyone is gray. Everything is gray. So don't judge people. Okay, that's my rant. Anyway, so I was able to put that book together, and there were so many themes of coming west to America and making something better for yourself. And along that way, you do things that you maybe don't realize are good or bad at the time, right? So, and what my great grandpa mostly did when he came here was work. I mean, he almost exclusively worked, and this was life then, right? The most interesting thing that I read, I think, was he was describing a discussion he had with his wife, and this was in like the 40s or 50s, and she basically was saying, I think they had 2 or 3 kids at the time. And she was basically saying, I don't think I want to have kids anymore. I feel like I have no life. I want to go out and do things. And he basically sat her down. And this is unheard of in our generation, but this is the funniest thing ever. And if you don't think it's funny, then you're too sensitive. But here, I mean, you are. But so this is what he sat her down, and he told her, citing Jesus, right? He told her that Jesus and God wanted the man to work for money so that he could provide for the wife who took care of the kids. This is what they believed, right? And not just him. So part of the story is he tells her that. And again, I'm not saying this is good or bad, okay? I'm not giving you my opinion on this, even though you want it as badly as you want it. Like this was just reality, and that's what I'm trying to get at. This was reality then. It isn't now. So to judge it by our current standards now is pointless. I mean, really, because what you wouldn't expect is her reaction was a positive one. Her reaction was, "You're right," and then they had another kid, and obviously to some extent there is a time difference. There is a belief difference in her own ability to say yes or no, maybe, but you can't. But we moved forward from there, and now we are where we are, right? But at that time, that's the way things were, and that was one of the most interesting things to me is reading that. If you're writing about that time period, there can't be a judgmental side of that based on our standards, right? And we see that sometimes now in recreations of that period where there's resentment or something. And it's not always accurate. That's the interesting thing. Sometimes it might be. Some women obviously might have been like, hell no, I'm not going to put up with that. And that's fine. That's the scenario it is. But to ignore the reality on the ground is also irresponsible. And it's just pretty interesting. I mean, it's really, really interesting to see kind of how much they both valued, I mean, both of them, family. Because whether it be him for working or her for taking care of the kids in the house, I mean, there honestly wasn't much to read in this memoir, because most of their lives were spent working towards that. They had the same purpose, and they both spent almost every waking hour building up their family, and ultimately getting it to the point where I could be where I am. And that was crazy. I mean, that was honestly something to me where it comes full circle. I mean, when you're publishing your great grandpa's book, who put in so much time of his own, who wrote it for his offspring and worked to the bone through the Depression, through all these interesting time periods that he was talking about, to get to this point. It was just really, really, really interesting. And so that kind of, like I said, I don't know whether I actively chose the genre. I don't know whether the genre was an active choice. And I think that it's a conglomeration of ideas. My other friend would try to tell me that meant that I don't have free will. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't have free will. Maybe I decided, maybe these ideas all came together from nothing. I don't know. I personally think I do have free will. I'm not going to get into that right now. But yeah, so but basically it's really cool to see how that all comes together. Moving along with the content, so I want to talk a little bit more. I'm not going to go too much longer with this episode. I'm probably going to keep each one between 50 minutes and an hour, I think. Not really sure. But yeah, so again, the girl is running. Jeannie Morel is running away. And she keeps running and ultimately finds the river, ultimately finds, and this isn't a spoiler anymore. It's kind of weird saying it out loud. I guess like it's just weird talking out loud about what happens because you're always afraid. Like, what if someone finds this episode first? If you found this episode first, shut it off right now because I'm about to talk. So Jeannie Morel finds the Vahani at the river. They save her at the river, but then they turn on their leader, and all hell breaks loose. I can't really honestly talk too much about what happens next or why this all happened. Obviously, there's the element of the Tokali and the Vahani relationship that is going to matter. It did matter, obviously, with Lennox deciding to kill off the chieftain in order to satisfy his own wishes. And the journey will be an interesting one. More than an interesting one. It'll be an exciting one. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. And I'll talk a little bit more before we finish to wrap up about what to expect and how this is going to go. So I think my goal is that week after week, every Tuesday, like I said, I'm going to come out with a chapter episode, followed the next Tuesday by a discussion episode, where I basically just riff like this for, like I said, probably like a full hour, 50 minutes to an hour. And with each discussion episode, I'm going to try to go into different themes. So today, obviously, was growth and getting started. If you want to hear about anything specific, or if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer questions. Feel free to write in on Facebook or anywhere, or send me messages. I'll respond to them directly on here if you send messages through my website. But I also will respond on social media. I'm fairly active on social media, so I'll respond on there if you have any direct questions there. And then on top of that, so again, if you like what you're hearing, if you like the first episode, please tell me about it. Please share as much as possible. And again, you might win a giveaway if you do. Signed books, and then an extra copy of Ready Player One, which is really cool. So share. If you, I mentioned in the last episode too, if you have read the books or any of the books, but you haven't reviewed yet, reviews really help a lot on Amazon. I would really appreciate it. And also, if you do enjoy the content, at any time, if you don't want to wait till the next episode comes out, you could always go on Amazon and buy the books to show your support. I might start up a Subscribe Star or Patreon at some point soon. If you don't want to buy the books, you just want to listen to the episodes, because they are really cool. Honestly, putting the music together behind them was really cool. I didn't realize. I was kind of worried about the excitement of an audiobook, but I think we did a pretty good job with episode 1 in making everything come together, and I look forward to the next ones because the music definitely adds a lot, and making the music is a lot of fun. So yeah, just let me know your thoughts at any time. Let me know if you have any questions. If you want me to solve all your problems, sign in, message in to join the gang. I'd be happy at any time to make you an honorary member. Just let me know your name. If you want your own interesting gang name, go ahead and sign in. Let me know. I'll give you a shout out. I'll give anyone a shout out. I'm happy to. And we'll have a good time. We're going to have a real good time. It's going to get dark at times. It's going to get real dark, but it has to get dark before it gets light, right? And I'm going to talk about a lot of different themes, a lot of different issues of what the characters go through, and some of what I've went through in relation. I mean, I think it's all related to stuff I've gone through, and hopefully that can help in different ways, lead to different questions, lead to me giving more information away about myself than I probably think I'm ready for right now. But we'll see how it goes. I usually can't control much of what I say. I kind of just talk, so I look forward to continuing to do that. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for right now. Look forward to more fighting, more bears, more monstrous beasts throughout the territory. It's a very large territory, and we're going to go through there together. We're going to make it from beginning to end. It's going to be a long journey. I don't think that I'm going to have seasons. I think that I'm going to probably try to go through all the books week after week after week. I don't think between book 1 and book 2, for example, I'm going to do a season break or anything. I might, but we'll see how that goes. Honestly, I'm really feeling this out. I haven't done a podcast before. I've recently gotten super into them, so that's kind of what prompted me to do it. And also, it just kind of fits with the structure of how I write. I think that I write very serially. Kind of might sound funny. That might sound South Park-ish a little bit. I write in a serial fashion. And so the series itself, the 5 books together, are one story, right? There's not too many cliffhangers. Some things you might think are cliffhangers, but there's an arc to every book, and there's an arc to every character's story, but it's very much a series. It's very much one large story. So, like I said, I'm gonna try to not do seasons, but we'll see how that goes. But again, I think that this story, the Civilands series, fits very well into the week by week structure. I always wanted to eventually get into TV writing. I've already started. What you can find on my website is a trailer that we put together with some people back home, some family and some friends, and came out very good. I was very happy with it. You'll recognize the opening song as part of the trailer for this podcast. But I think the structure will be fun. I think it will be good, and we'll get through it together. It'll be a good time. Anyway, so that's it. That's it for today's episode. Look forward to Chapter 2 next week. And until then, it's been a pleasure. Have a good one.